This is episode 6 in the Eterra Cycle series. Today, I want to stay with the codas because codas are interesting things. They come after the apparent ending, but they are not merely leftovers. At their best, they do something stranger than conclusion. They change the scale of what came before. They take a story that seemed to have found its stopping point and reveal that the emotional or spiritual frame around it was always larger than the plot first allowed us to see. That is very much what these codas are doing. The dream of the inner sun and last letter of the architect are both concerned with threshold experiences, but they are concerned with them in different ways. One is visionary, one is confessional, one opens by dream, the other opens by ruin, memory, and warning, and together they deepen one of the central concerns of the Eterra Cycle, which is this: what does it mean to approach something sacred without trying to possess it? That question lives underneath both pieces. And in some ways, it lives underneath the whole series. The dream of the inner sun begins in uncertainty. He does not know whether he is asleep. That mattered to me immediately, because I did not want the dream to feel like an escape from reality or a decorative mystical interlude. I wanted it to feel like a thinning of reality, not a departure from the world, but a disclosure of something that had always been there, waiting just behind ordinary sight. That is why the transition is so abrupt. No clear drifting into sleep, no soft surrender, just one breath belonging to the known world, to stone and exhaustion and damage, and the next belonging to something older, something still, something that does not arrive so much as reveal itself. That distinction is important. Because the inner sun is not invented by the dream, it is encountered there. The dream space itself had to feel different from an ordinary subterranean fantasy. I did not want just another cavern, not simply rock overhead, magnified and made beautiful. I wanted a world inward enough to become cosmic, a sky of stone, a vast bowl above him, not merely geological, but almost liturgical, dark as deep water, veined with pale fire and moving gold. No stars, yet the absence of stars felt like a presence. That mattered to me very much. The idea that what is missing can itself become palpable, as if the heavens of the outer world had been folded inward and remade in silence. That is the logic of the inward kingdom throughout this cycle. The deeper world is not a lesser copy of the surface. It is not simply beneath, it is more interior, more essential, closer, perhaps, to the hidden grammar of reality. The plain of crystal dust, the luminous mountains, the rivers of light, all of these images were meant to create a sense of immense calm, but not harmless calm, a patient radiance. An order that is beautiful but not decorative. And then, of course, there is the inner sun itself. That image sits at the center of the coda for a reason. I wanted it to be recognizably sun, like, but utterly different from the sun of the surface. The surface sun is harsh, obvious, imperial. It declares day. It crowns towers. It makes kingdoms legible. The inner sun does something else. It permeates. It does not rule. It remembers. That is why, when the woman describes it, she does not call it the center of the world. She calls it the memory. That phrase may be the heart of the coda. Not the center, the memory. The world is held together by more than matter, more than roots and pressure and fire. There must be something that does not forget what light is. That idea is very important to me in the Eterra mythology, because memory in these books is never merely psychological, it is structural. Places remember, stone remembers, songs remember, worlds remember, and the inner sun is not simply illumination, it is a form of fidelity, a keeping, a vow. That is why its light does not dazzle him, it knows him, and that to me is more frightening and more tender than judgment. Not judged, not measured, not forgiven, known. That is one of the deepest emotional currents in the coda, because to be known at that depth is not necessarily comforting. It removes the protections of self-mythology. It strips away performance. And in a story so concerned with hidden structures, being known becomes one of the most intimate and most dangerous experiences imaginable. The path, the pillars, and the stair all grow out of that logic. The path appears behind him as though waiting for recognition rather than construction. The pillars reflect not just images of him, but possibilities, scales of selfhood, versions of identity that are partial, true, and unstable. I wanted those reflections to feel like forms of encounter rather than information. He does not stop to decipher them, he feels them. And then beyond them comes the stare. That stair is one of the clearest threshold images in the cycle. It rises through open air toward the inner sun. No railings, no walls, no support, just ascent across exposure. And at its foot stands the woman in white. She is not meant to be reduced to a neat symbolic role. I did not want her to function as a simple guide figure, or a prophecy mechanism, or a fantasy apparition whose job is to explain the lore. She is more like the dream's voice of correction. She speaks with the authority of someone who belongs to the logic of the place more than to the logic of ordinary plot. And what she offers is not instruction in the usual sense. She offers reorientation. The line that matters most to me in that exchange is this: the old design was not made to be owned, it was made to be entered. That may be one of the governing principles of the entire Eterra cycle, the difference between ownership and entrance, between mastery and accord, between possession and reverence. A great many people in fantasy, and perhaps in life, encounter mystery only by trying to reduce it, to measure it, name it, control it, turn it into property, turn it into doctrine, turn it into certainty. But the Oda design in this world resists that impulse. It asks for something more dangerous and more difficult. Not command, listening, not conquest, accord. That is why when he asks what he is supposed to do, she says the wrong question is always about power. The right question is about accord. And that is also why the distinction between being chosen and being called matters so much. Chosen belongs to old fantasies of greatness. It flatters the self. It places someone at the center of a cosmic design. But called is humbler, stranger, and harder to bear. A summons is not a reward. It is a demand for answer. It does not promise glory. It asks whether you will listen. That difference struck me as spiritually essential for this world because one of the corruptions the series keeps circling is the human desire to turn contact with the deeper world into proof of exceptional entitlement. To say, I touched mystery, therefore mystery belongs to me. The codas resist that very strongly. He is not elevated into sovereignty by the dream. He is burdened by it. He is brought to the edge of answer and then woken before completion. That ending matters. He does not climb fully. He does not reach the inner sun. He wakes. And what remains is not resolution, but certainty of a different kind. Not certainty about meaning in a neat explanatory sense, but certainty that the inner sun is real, that it remains, that it waits. Not for conquest, not for worship, but for the answer to a question no kingdom has yet learned to ask. That is where the dream opens into the letter, because the last letter of the architect takes many of the same concerns and grounds them in history, guilt, inheritance, and moral failure. If the dream is revelation by image, the letter is revelation by testimony. And Aaron Valeth was written as someone who has survived too long with too much clarity. He is not speaking from purity. He is speaking from damage. That mattered a lot to me. I did not want the architect's voice to sound untouchably wise or abstractly noble. I wanted him to sound wary, lucid, regretful, and careful with certainty. From the beginning, the letter pushes against titles. He says he does not know the name of the one who will receive it, And perhaps that is for the best, because names grow heavy, they invite burden, they become magnets for prophecy, expectation, and ruin. That idea links very closely to the distinction in the dream between being chosen and being called. The books are repeatedly suspicious of the kind of naming that turns a person into an instrument of grand design. Aran is trying, in some small way, to spare the future reader from that machinery, so he writes not as master to apprentice, nor chosen heir to chosen heir, but as one weary soul speaking across the dark to another. That tone was crucial, because the letter is not primarily a transmission of secret information. It is an act of moral care. Aaron's first correction is one I think defines the deeper role of the architects in this world. An architect does not build the deep places. No one does. The deep places already are. That sentence matters immensely because it overturns the fantasy that architecture here is domination. The true architect does not create the sacred. He listens for where it wishes to open. He does not command the hidden light. He learns how not to wound it. I wanted that to feel like a direct challenge to the human instinct to rename mystery as ownership. Aaron says this very plainly. Power offers a false translation. It takes mystery and renames it ownership. It takes nearness and renames it mastery. It takes reverence and calls it weakness. That, to me, is the central disease of the world he describes. And it is not confined to fantasy. It is a human habit. The belief that if something can be approached, it can be used. If something can be known, it can be ruled. If something can be measured, it can be owned. The letter stands firmly against that impulse. The world below is not a prize, not a weapon, not waiting for a ruler. That sequence is very important to the moral structure of the series, because hidden power in fantasy is very often written as a test of worthiness that leads, eventually, to sanctioned possession. I did not want that. I wanted the deeper world to remain sacred precisely by refusing to become a trophy for the correct person. That is why the tragedy in Aaron's account is not that wicked men discovered a good thing. It is that even within a culture devoted to wonder, ambition slowly corrupted the mode of approach. The betrayal begins not with war, but with interpretation, with the claim that the deep world can be made useful, with the certainty that a little control would be acceptable. Only enough, of course, to keep others safe. Only enough to prevent misuse. That language of justified domination matters because it is always how corruption introduces itself, not as naked evil, as necessity, as stewardship, as order. Aaron's grief lies partly in how late he recognized that. He saw warning signs and called them disagreements. He saw arrogance and called it confidence. He thought there would be time to correct the course. There was not. That, to me, is one of the saddest parts of the letter, because it is not the grief of simple defeat. It is the grief of delayed recognition, and when the hidden chambers answer the violence done to them, they do not answer in wrath, they answer in withdrawal. That felt important enough to me that I want to linger on it. The world below does not rage like men rage. It withdraws, passages go silent, light dims, resonance fails, roots become unreadable, not destroyed, not shattered, but veiled. The ambitious call this resistance, the wise know it as grief. I think that is one of the most revealing ideas in the cycle, that the sacred, when violated, may retreat rather than retaliate. And that retreat can wound an entire civilization without ever becoming spectacle. From there, the letter becomes an account of fragments, hiding what can be hidden, breaking keys, scattering records, entrusting partial truths to the humble, even lying when necessary because truth in the wrong chamber becomes a knife. That line matters a great deal because it rejects the simplification that truth is always good merely by being truth. Context matters. Character matters. The shape of the hand receiving it matters. And that has been true throughout these books. Knowledge is never neutral once human ambition touches it. Yet, for all his grief, Aaron does not write from despair. That was essential. He insists on this. And I wanted him to insist on it because despair is too easy a final note for damaged guardians. He has seen too much beauty in the inward world to believe despair is the deepest truth. Instead, he offers something stranger and gentler. What is sacred can be wounded, but not easily ended. What withdraws may yet return. What is hidden is not always lost. Sometimes it is only waiting for a touch that does not seek to possess it. That is hope in the register of this series. Not sentimental hope, not easy restoration, but the possibility that reverence still matters, that humility is not too late, that there may still come a person who stands before the threshold and does not mistake it for a throne. That phrase is, for me, the emotional center of the letter. Not mistake it for a throne, because so much of human tragedy in these books comes from exactly that mistake. Threshold turned into sovereignty. Summons turned into entitlement. Mystery turned into doctrine. Aaron instead imagines someone frightened by the deep places in the right way, not because they are weak, but because some part of them still understands reverence. And then the letter turns from warning toward instruction, not instructions for use, instructions for posture. Do not go below seeking answers first. Go seeking the right question. That line is very close to the final concern of the first book, and really to the series as a whole. Some journeys do not give clean answers. They change the kind of questions you can ask. Aaron offers several of those questions. What must be protected from me as much as from others? What does the world remember that we have forgotten? What shape does humility take when the stakes are greater than a kingdom? Those are not heroic questions in the ordinary sense. They do not flatter the seeker. They decenter the seeker. And that, I think, is what makes them trustworthy. His warning about the inner sun follows the same logic. If you stand before it, do not call it yours. Do not make yourself its interpreter. Do not build doctrine around the warmth on your face. Light has been ruined before by those who wished to explain it too completely. That may be the sternest sentence in the whole letter, and one of the most important, because explanation can become desecration if it hardens too quickly into ownership. The final movement of the letter broadens beautifully. I think when Aaron reflects on surface and deep, he says he once imagined them as separable, but that was one of their greatest errors. The roots and the branches belong to the same living thing. That line is fundamental to the Eterra Cycle. The surface world and the inward world are not enemies. They are not rival realities. One cannot be betrayed without poisoning the other. And no healing below can remain pure if it has no mercy for the ordinary suffering of those above. That matters because it keeps the series from collapsing into a simple mythology of hidden depth as superior truth and surface life as mere blindness. The relationship is more intimate than that, more reciprocal, more tragic, and more hopeful. The architect ends not with certainty, but with release. He sends the letter into darkness as a final inadequate act of care. I love that phrase very much. A final inadequate act of care, because that is what so many legacies really are. Not perfection, not completed design, but fragments offered forward in hope. And the ending blesses not mastery, but witness. May you come to the threshold with empty hands. May you have the strength to listen. May the world find in you not a master, but a faithful witness. That, I think, is the moral and spiritual key of these two codas together. The dream reveals the possibility of inward calling. The letter reveals the cost of betraying that call. The dream gives us radiance. The letter gives us conscience. The dream opens the mystery. The letter teaches how badly mystery can be wounded when men confuse nearness with right. and both together insist on the same distinction. The deepest work is not possession, it is accord, not conquest, listening, not chosenness in the flattering sense, but the humility to answer a summons without turning it into a crown. So, if episode 6 has one central thought, perhaps it is this: the Eterra Cycle is not finally about who discovers the hidden world. It is about the moral difference between entering a mystery and trying to own it. The inner sun waits. The thresholds remain. The old song is still sounding. But the question is not who is powerful enough to claim those things. The question is who can approach them without shame. Thank you for listening.